Good afternoon, student. Today we will discuss translation. The last part of translation, that's the translation regulation. We will discuss some of the critical assay that's named as toe print assay. Then a regulation which is named as riboswitch, and the different G protein which are playing a crucial role in translation. How they are functioning, that we will discuss. We will start our discussion with this toe print assay. This assay was developed by two scientists when they are actually searching the role of eukaryotic translation initiation factor EF1 and EF1A. Remember, these two initiation factors, what is the role of this initiation factor in forming a pre-initiation complex? If you remember eukaryotic initiation, there's a pre-initiation complex formation, 40As with a small subunit of ribosome, and after that 48As, and then that molecule come and bind. There's a cap binding protein, and the whole molecule, all the small subunit of ribosome together with many factors actually scan for the first initiation codon. So in that context, what is the role of eukaryotic transcription factor EF1 and EIF1A? That was their that they're looking for. So what they have done, they did an assay. So let us discuss about the assay. So they have taken mammalian beta globin mRNA. So the green color one, what you are seeing with the 5 prime cap, this is mammalian beta globin mRNA, and you can see the UG is there. They mixed with a primer that binds downstream of the initiation codon of the mRNA. So you can see here the red color one is the primer, and that has a sequence similarity with the 3 prime end of the mRNA. Okay, and with that, if you can incubate this thing with nucleotides, NTPs, as well as reverse transcriptase, what you can generate? You can generate a cDNA. The black color one, the line which is going from 5 prime to 3 prime, this is actually the cDNA corresponding to the mRNA, which they have mentioned beta globin mRNA. Now this is an in vitro assay they are doing. Now there are 3 conditions they have maintained. A is the negative control. That means they have only the mRNA and the primer. With the help of the primer, in presence of the reverse transcriptase and NTPs, the primer will extend a full length cDNA up to the cap. Okay. Now what they did in the next tube, that let's assume this is a 3 tube experiment. So the next tube, what they're doing, they have the same template, that means the mRNA. They have the primer, reverse transcriptase with all the NTPs, but they have incubated it with 40S subunit of ribosome, ATP, all initiation factors except EIF1 and EIF1A. Now, once they have they did the reverse transcriptase action, what they find, the primer will extend it and it will reach up to the point where it can get its template, as they assume, as they found that the length of this cDNA, when they compared with the first one, the previous one, they found that is smaller. How they have done? The product they are running in a gel. So the bigger fragment will run slower. So the top band is for the longest one. That's a full length cDNA. What they have found? They found if they incubate with these factors, they have got another band. that is migrating faster compared to the previous one. Now in the third tube, what they have done, they have incubated this entire mRNA primer, NTPs, reverse transcriptase, now with all the subunits, 40S subunit, ATP, all initiation factors, including EF1 and EF1A, remember. Now the transcript, the cDNA synthesize, when they have run the gel, what they found, the length is very small. So it is fastest moving band. Why this thing has happened? It has happened because when there is no extract they have incubated, what we are expecting in vitro, we are getting a full length of mammalian beta globin cDNA here, which is a pretty big and giving you this band. Now when you are incubated with 40S subunit with all the factor except these two, the cDNA gets synthesized and it will, because of the factors are binding to the cap binding site, it gets stop. It stop when it reach the age of this complex. They have named it complex 1. So the length is smaller than this one. Now when they have added these two initiation factor, EIF1 and EIF1A, it starts scanning. That's why the whole complex with the smaller subunit of ribosome travel towards downstream and reach the AUG, that's called scanning. And because of that, the primer extension assay, this is actually a primer extension assay. So cDNA, what we are getting is very small length. It reach here, after that it gets hindered. It cannot go beyond this point. Now if you think 40S subunit as a foot, its leading edge would be the toe, which is why they call this is a toe print assay. Understood? So this is the assay. By doing this assay, they have concluded the function of eukaryotic initiation factor EIF1 and EIF1A. Not only they bind to the amino acyl sites, it also helps in the whole complex for scanning for the first initiation codon. This is the thing is mentioned here. This is the negative control, essential ingredient. Leaving is all essential ingredients such as 40S subunit. So no complex can be formed between 40S ribosomal subunit and mRNA. With no 40S particle to block the reverse transcriptase, the primer is extended to the 5' end of mRNA. That's what this yield is, a runoff extended primer corresponding to the naked mRNA. So B is that the complex formed in the absence of EIF1 and EIF1A. Add all the components listed at left but except those two. So complex 1 formed at the cap but does not progress far, if at all. Thus the primer is extended a long distance to the leading edge of 40S particle. So C is that, what is in the C? This is the last diagram. Complex formed in the presence of EIF1 and EIF1A. The 40S ribosomal particle has scanned downstream to the initiation codon and formed a stable complex that's called complex 2. Thus primer is extended only a short distance before it blocks by the leading edge of 40S particle. So that's what this whole assay. Then we will start some of the prokaryotic translational control. So we will start with that see, prokaryotic transcription control we have discussed, but as RNA they are having so many secondary structures, okay? Because of that there are different way it can control its translation. So there are many evidences are there, so we cannot study everything, but few we will study which is in the syllabus. So the secondary structure can govern translation initiation at some particular phages they are talking here, MS2 class of phages. So the secondary structure can govern translation initiation as in the replicase gene of the MS2 phages whose initiation codon is buried in the secondary structure until ribosome translating the code gene open up this structure. So this is what actually the meaning of this thing, that in certain type of phages, the replicating genes, their translation only can start when the entire coding genes transcription get over. After that only the secondary structure get open, the replication related genes get access for its translation. So that's what is the message from here, that the secondary structure of mRNA plays a crucial role in prokaryotic translational control. Let us see this one. What is this? This is a model for activation of RPOS mRNA translation by an sRNA, small RNA. Okay, so this is RPOS mRNA. RPOS mRNA codes for sigma factor. You remember in the transcription, sigma factor, RNA polymerase sigma factor plays a crucial role in recognition of the initiation of transcription. So that's a type of sigma factor, and you must be knowing there are different type of sigma factor. The regular one is sigma 70. This is RPOS mRNA. It codes for a sigma factor which is sigma 38. This sigma factor plays a crucial role in stress related situation. So if there is a stress for the bacteria, they switch the sigma from 70 to 38. So the how that gene for the sigma factor is regulated in, it's because of the 5 prime untranslated region. There is a typical secondary here structure, hairpin loop structure. So the first AUG, the first codon is not accessible. The SD sequence, meaning Shine-Dalton sequence, is hidden. So the AUG is not accessible. So very weak translations takes place. So during stress related thing, some other small RNA which they call DSRA, that's a type of RNA, it's a non-coding RNA, which a part of DSRA RNA has a similarity. This is a small RNA. We have already discussed miRNA, siRNA, all these things. So there are so many non-coding RNA. A part of it has a sequence similarity. Because of that, this binding, now the secondary structure get altered and this AUG is accessible. Okay. Now here see some other feature of this secondary structure and how it's regulate translation. This is a typical gene RPOH. What is RPOH? Gene codes for sigma 32, a heat shock sigma factor. So if E. coli experience temperature raise 42, then the normal sigma factor doesn't work. In that case, RNA polymerase take another sigma factor, that's called sigma 32. Now the sigma 32 AUG is masked inside this complicated here pin structure. So when the temperature raises, this little bit melt, and then this AUG is accessible and more amount of AUG and more amount of sigma protein gets synthesized, sigma 32 protein. Okay, sigma 32 protein gets synthesized. That's what I have written here. In another example, the initiation codon in the mRNA of E. coli heat shock sigma factor, that is sigma 32, is replaced by secondary structure that is relaxed by heating. Thus, heat can cause an immediate unmasking of sigma 32 mRNA initiation codon and a burst of sigma 32 synthesis. Hope you understood. Then we will come to another concept which is called riboswitches. So what are these? Riboswitches are kind of censored, are regions within mRNA that can bind to small molecules, change conformation, and thereby switch gene expression, maybe on or off. For example, by shifting from an anti-terminator to a terminator to cause the attenuation of transcription. So it's may anti-terminator now become a causing the termination of transcription because the structure get changed. because of binding of certain things within that RNA sequence, its conformation get changed, and it switching from anti-terminator to terminator sequence now. The region of the RNA that binds to the small molecule is known as aptamer. So remember what is an aptamer? It's a sequence of RNA where actually another molecule comes and bind, and because of that there is a conformational change and it switches its activity. That region called aptamer. Now small RNA in concert with proteins, that why it modulates, can affect mRNA secondary structure to control translation initiation. Ribose switches can also be used to control translation initiation via mRNA stability secondary structure. Now, as an example, we will be informing here. That means what? A protein or some factor should come and bind to a particular site within an RNA, or an RNA can also come and bind within that region of mRNA. So that is the sequence called aptamer, and because of that there is a conformational change, and the normal activity of that RNA, what it was doing, now changed, maybe switching on and off. One example here, that is 59 untranslated region of that sequence region of E. coli Thym mRNA contains a ribose switch, including an aptamer that binds thymine and its metabolites, maybe thymine phosphate and especially thymine pyrophosphate. So the gene codes for thymine E. coli Thym mRNA contains a ribose switch that's within that sequence, including an aptamer. Aptamer meaning a sequence where other molecule can come and bind. Which are the molecules? That is thymine phosphate or TPP can come and bind. Now, when TPP is abundant, meaning more in number, it binds to this aptamer. That means it controls its own synthesis. So it binds to this aptamer, causing a conformational shift in the mRNA that ties up the Shine-Dalgarno sequence in the secondary structure. This shift hides the Shine-Dalgarno sequence from ribosome and inhibits translation of the mRNA. This saves energy because Thym mRNA encodes an enzyme that needed to produce more thymine and thus TPP. Now, when TPP is more the Thym mRNA need not to be switch on, because it is synthesizing its own TPP more. So what it does, TPP go and bind certain sequences, and because of the binding it hides this Shine-Dalgarno sequence. So the ribosomal small limit cannot find that AUG and translation get regulated. So that's the example of the E. coli Thym mRNA, and this is a translational control here, which we call ribose switches. So the last part is that here, this is the G protein, a function of G protein. So what I have taken here, you must be knowing the several translation factors harness the energy of GTP to catalyze molecular motions. These factors belong to a large class of G protein that are activated by GTP, have intrinsic GTPase activity, that is activated by an external factor gap, are inactivated when they cleaved off their GTP to GDP, and are reactivated by another external factor, that is GEF, guanine nucleotide exchange factor. This we have studied from our third semester when we studied G protein exchange factor, all these things. So I have already mentioned in certain cases how elongation time, how this GEF, who is playing the GEF, if you remember, EFTU and EFTS, there is a GEF factors comes and play a role. It's GTP bound form and GDP bound form. So this is a classical model of how these G proteins are activated and deactivated. So if I start from the A1, there's a triangle inactive G protein it's showing. It gets GTP and then become an active G protein with a GTP. It has an intrinsic GTPase. Once it does its function, it has an intrinsic GTPase, which we'll call GTPase activated protein, GAP. It will release the phosphate and convert to a GDP bound form, which is inactive, and the GDP bound form will again get active by binding with GTP with the help of an guanine nucleotide exchange protein. So this is the classical mode of action of G proteins once it's inactive form and as well as an active form. Now here are some points for you if this question comes, how these G proteins plays a critical role in translation. All of these factors belong to a large class of protein known as G protein that perform a variety of role cellular functions. All are protein, meaning I'm mentioning the factors. IF2 GTP, it also has a GTPase activity. You remember 5B eukaryotic initiation factor 5B, that was also having GTPase. Then EF2, EFG, all these are having GTP binding activity. So they are GDP and GTP binding protein. In fact, G is a G protein, comes from guanine nucleotide binding protein. They cycle among 3 conformational states depending on whether they are bound to GDP, GTP or neither nucleotide, and these conformational states determine their activities. Okay, when they are bound to GTP, when they are bound to the GTP, they are active. When they have an intrinsic GTPase activity, it's stimulated by another agent called GTPase activator, GAP. When a GAP stimulates their GTPase activity, they cleave their bound GTP to GDP. That's one inactivating themselves. So it's an intrinsic GTPase activity. They are reactivated by another protein called a guanine nucleotide exchange protein. This factor removes GDP from the inactive protein and allows the another molecule of GTP to bind. So guanine nucleotide exchange factor plays a crucial role for exchanging from GDP to GTP form, and one guanine nucleotide exchange protein comes immediately in mind. I already mentioned EFTS. Remember, we have seen that EFTS is essential for replacing GDP with GTP for eukaryotic elongation factor TU. Okay, so with this I'm ending today's presentation. Thank you.